Carol, it's great to get your perspective on this. The data actually wasn't as terrible as one might think. In fact, it was insurance costs that actually pushed higher. How would you rate small businesses right now?
I think it's been a challenge for small businesses. And you have to remember when you look at the NFIB survey that is backward looking. And April was a chaotic month for everybody, but especially for small business owners. If you were a small business that had part of your supply chain or all of your supply chain abroad, or perhaps maybe depended upon a supplier, with 145% tariffs, you basically ground to a halt. And so while 30% is still a very heavy lift for small business, that was something that basically stopped a lot of businesses. And then you had all of the chaos in the market. And while Main Street is not Wall Street, there's certainly the secondary effects. When you have, the wealth effect from people's 401ks going down, uncertainty about whether you can hire or not, it creates a very big challenge. And that does find its way down to small businesses.
What we do seem to know, though, is the floor. And the floor seems to be that blanket 10%. And clearly, the worst case scenario for tariffs does wind up coming down with at least 90-day reprieves. Does that give small businesses more confidence?
Well, I certainly hope that is the floor and that things don't change. When you have a 90-day pause and you have a wild card in terms of this administration, they've said that this is going to go on for 90 days, but they could change it at any point in time. And we've seen, these kind of unexpected things happen. So I think that that's an issue. It's also very difficult, for any business, but particularly a small business, to plan in 90-day increments. So even though there is a theoretical floor and ceiling, as you said, Alix, it does make it more challenging. The small businesses I've been talking to are in a rush right now to try to get as much done as they can within that 90-day window and see how it goes from there. But the hope is that we are, in de-escalation and that things moving forward will only be better, not worse. And I think that will really save small businesses that were, frankly, on the brink in many cases of having to go out of business if something wasn't decided pretty quickly. So we're pretty relieved about that on the small business front.
Still challenges for them. And I am curious just about the overall market environment, economic environment, I should say, and these sort of dour sentiment readings, not necessarily on existing small businesses, Carol, but for those entrepreneurs out there or budding entrepreneurs who are thinking of starting a business. We've seen business creation in this country effectively crater over the last couple of decades. And I am curious if this actually exacerbates that.
Well, I think there was a lot of optimism about the Trump administration from small businesses and those would-be entrepreneurs that you're talking about, Romaine, in hopes that we would get more clarity on the tax cuts, hope that we would get maybe some deregulation, that it would make it easier to be a small business, even something as simple as rolling back some of the constraints on independent contractors and gig workers that allow small businesses to work with staff more flexibly. So I think all of those things were very positive. And that's where you saw that big optimism swing in kind of last year. But then when you have something like this that comes out of left field, particularly after small businesses have been beaten up by COVID mandates, by inflation, and so on and so forth, it does make you pause as somebody who's an entrepreneur. Now, entrepreneurs are always optimistic. They're always going to think that, that the best case is ahead and that they can do it. That's what an entrepreneur is. Yeah. But it does create just one more potential hurdle. And we want to remove those hurdles for entrepreneurs.
Well, what about, if you have a company out there, a small business that's just starting up, and particularly a goods business? I mean, the playbook, at least for the last, 20 years or so, was, if you were going to manufacture something, you sort of reached out to some, random person in China. Hopefully you got the right bid. Hopefully you got the right mold. You went to town, got your shipments, and sold them. How reliable is that even going to be? Even if there is some sort of trade deal struck, I mean, would you sort of bank your entire inventory on that relationship?
I guess the good news for entrepreneurs is that we do have the majority of them in the service business, not to say that they may not have some level of exposure to what's happening abroad, but that's certainly a path that I think more entrepreneurs are going to think about. But those who are considering goods, it is very risky for many reasons for them to pursue, maybe a relationship with China, but frankly, even other nations. When you think about what happened on Liberation Day, all of the companies that had been manufacturing manufacturing in China and try to decouple to other nations, they also got crazy tariffs. And then, that was mitigated eventually. But they did what they thought was the right thing and were still punished for it. So I think it's really important to move past this and to give a clear message to entrepreneurs and small businesses saying we're going to do the things to remove barriers, to deregulate, to make it easier for you because you are the backbone of the economy. And if we want to grow the GDP, and by the way, with the debt to GDP that we have we need to grow the GDP, that we are going to need small businesses to participate. And we've heard Scott Bessent say the same thing.